In this conversation, we'll explore the many threads and themes of pain. All about pain. Let's begin by exploring what it is. So pain equals separation and longing. So whether it's a physical pain and we sever the relay, the relationship of energy between part of our finger and the rest of the hand, and we long for wholeness, but we're now apart. We are apart. Or whether it's separation from someone that we love and we long for wholeness and connection. Or whether it's separation from God, Goddess, all that is, the sense of connection and longing for that. We don't feel pain when we're separate from something that we fear and hate. We don't feel pain when we're separate from a food dish that we dislike. So pain is the combination of separation from something that we long for. And the greater the separation, the deeper the longing, the greater the pain. So if we look at pain at its essence, it begins with separation, right? You cannot have pain. You cannot long for something that is completely integrated. It begins by cutting, right? You take the one, you take the whole, the uninterrupted ecology, and you divide it. You descend from a state of grace into the knowledge of good and evil, which is into the language of duality. And now you've got two halves. You've got pain, you've got separation. But you also have creativity, right? Because when something is whole, right, before the sexes divide into male and female, when something is whole, it's hard to create, right? All creativity, everything new comes from the synergy of two parts, right? When you create a new child, you have the synergy of two people, a male and a female, in a relay and a relationship of energy that creates a third energy. And you can't create, right, unless you have two parts, and you can't have two parts unless you've cut the one into two. And so there's a connection between pain and creativity. Many patrons of the arts, understanding this, do not want to make their artists too comfortable. Many poets will create their best work after the death of what they love most, or in a place of pain, because pain is also a very focusing energy, right? Amorphous pleasure and happiness can be a very diffuse energy, but to create something new that's never existed before, you need focus. And pain focuses us more than pleasure. So you have two threads of pain leading to creativity, right? The thread of focus, with pain being exquisitely focused. When you have something in severe pain, your entire universe collapses and you focus on one thing. Now, if the pain is too high, right, if the pain is too intense, you can no longer think. And so you can no longer give birth to poetry, to writing, etc., because just being present to it is too overwhelming. It's too painful. On the other hand, when things are too perfect, when things are too symmetrical, too whole, there's very little impetus, right, to create. If you look at most of human language, It is a discussion and a response to suffering. Right? You ask someone how they're doing, and they say, I'm doing great, and that tends to be it. It's not a terrific creative effort. But you ask someone in the throes of misery and despair how they're doing, and they can go on, and often do, for 2 or 3 hours in exquisite prose discussing what's wrong with the system and how this leads to this pain and that leads to that pain. And you have a tremendous amount of creative expression. Now, the question is, how do we respond to pain? What's the language of response if we kind of look at some of the different ways to respond to pain? Well, that's what we're going to look at here. So the first is preemption. So preemption comes from memory, from knowledge, from past experience. And basically we say, like, the human body is generally painful at, for example, being in 120-degree water. You can get into that water. It's incredibly hot, but it's so hot that there's a 99% probability that it's going to be quite painful. And so with mapping out discomfort, which has to do with extreme, the relationship of extremes, in this case, extreme temperature, you avoid it. You preempt the pain with knowledge, and you steer your life, your body, you steer someone else's life and body, your child, etc., to preempt the pain. And this is, since everyone wants to avoid suffering, preemption is one form of intelligence. So you could in some way measure the intelligence of someone by how effectively they preempt pain that they want to avoid. So preemption is one response to pain. If you are unable to preempt the pain, withdrawal. Right? So you didn't know that really hot water was painful. You put your foot in, your toe in, and it's very, very painful. And so you quickly pull it out, and you then withdraw and learn from the experience, and you don't put your body into that hot water again. Similar with, very, very cold temperatures. You learn the comfort zone in the middle, and you avoid with preemption. If not, you learn and you withdraw. You respond by withdrawing. Now, if you cannot respond with withdrawal, like you didn't put your hand into the hot water, it was a volcano erupting, and the temperature is incredibly hot, and you can't withdraw because it's all around you. Well, if you have prolonged exposure to some form of painful overstimulation, one of the things you can do is to numb. Right? You go to a dentist, they're going to pull out one of your teeth, they're going to do some fillings, etc. And you can't avoid the pain. Feeling the pain is horrific, and you have to endure it, meaning there's no dental technology on the planet today that is painless. Right? If you're going to get a cavity, odds are there's going to be some pain. And so one is to numb it, physiologically numb it. The other thing that you can do is to endure it. Right? If you don't want to numb it, you don't want to take the painkillers, you want to be present for it, you can endure the pain. Now, enduring intense pain often transforms the identity. Hatred is a very common side effect of being forced to endure intense pain. If you watch, you wish, of course, if you love someone, you wish the best for them. And if you watch someone very close to you being raped, being tortured, and you cannot respond. You're tied up, there's 5 people against 1, you can't respond. You must endure the pain. That often metastasizes into hatred, into rage, into self-hatred, into hating the world, rage at oneself, rage at the world. Rage, hatred, etc. is often a byproduct, but not always, right? You can also endure something and come out the other side, understanding that you are stronger than you thought you were, that your identity is resilient, and you are more courageous. You're more confident and courageous in your ability to move forward. But that depends on your tolerance, which is often earned, right? So as you endure and are exposed to things, if it's completely out of the known terrain, it tends to have its way with us. If we expose ourselves consciously to ice baths, hot temperatures, sweat lodges, long walks, fasting, when we expose ourselves to discomfort willingly, we build endurance. We build a tolerance. When we cause it and pamper ourselves and stay very narrowly inside a comfort zone, and then are thrust into deeply uncomfortable, painful territory, our muscle for endurance tends to flip into despair, helplessness, and then from that into hatred or dissociation, which is another form of withdrawal, but it's a psychological dissociation. Dissociation can be to leave the body, and that's look down at the body as if it's something else, rather than identifying with the body, to look at the body. Dissociation, can also occur with, just that's not real. I don't believe it. It's not happening. It can also occur with insanity, right? Because the ego is born and framed and held in place with language. And so if one lets go of the order of words and stops processing, I don't want to be here, I don't want to process what's going on, I don't want to feel this, I don't want to think these thoughts, I'm just going to dissociate, either go off into fantasy or, just disconnect in a variety of ways. So insanity is, one of the areas of dissociation. And a lot of pain comes in the way that we create it with language. No one loves me is a very, very painful thought. But if you're insane and instead you say vibam bumping, no pain there at all, right? Right. So the emotional response that comes from staying within the framework of sanity and trying to link up the meaning of behavior with certain words can create incredibly painful catch-22s, right? Because if no one loves me and therefore I don't love myself, and I won't love myself until people love me, and no one loves me because I don't love myself, and the reality that I'm creating is more difficult to love, and we're in a culture that isn't very competent at loving, and so I'm spiraling down, and the more I spiral down, the less people love me, and the less people love me, the more I hate myself, and the more I hate myself, the more I spiral down, and so it's, these, these painful points can reach a point where it's just too painful. So self-harm is one of the response to pain. It's in the childlike territory. Right? Children that are abused will harm themselves. They will internalize the abuse. They will blame themselves for being abused, and they will harm themselves. And so self-harm is one of the responses to pain, basically saying that the world is hurting me, I must be bad. The child makes it all about themselves. So I will hurt myself, and hopefully the world will forgive me, number one. Two, hopefully I'll have a sense of agency by doing it myself, and hopefully avoid the sense of shock, and also maybe be pitied, right? If I hurt myself, there's less of a tendency for someone else to feel like they have to hurt me. I'm voluntarily experiencing the pain and punishment that someone wants me to experience. So there's self-harm. There's also conscious response. Right? So this would be, I'm in pain. So the conscious response would be, what is the pain? I'm too hot. Okay. What can I do to cool myself down? Okay, I could do this, this, and this. Of all those options, which one seems most expedient? Okay, this one. I will remove my sweater, right? I will remove my jacket, my sweater, and then you consciously respond and the pain dissipates. So there's conscious response as a response to pain. There's also need fulfillment. One of the sources of pain is we all have needs, whether it's oxygen or love and belonging or self-esteem or developing our gifts. We have needs. And when those needs are not met, we feel pain. And so when we respond by meeting our needs, we reduce our pain. And that also kind of follows a general graph of competency, which covers this entire territory, right? So there aren't many people that want to feel pain, right? You know, that if they do, it's part of a strategy of long-term alleviation, right? I'll feel guilty, and then you won't reject me, right? And then I won't feel the pain of rejection, right? So even when we adopt pain willingly, which is one of the childlike strategies of responding to pain, punishing ourselves, the goal of punishing ourselves is to reduce the overall level of pain long term. So it's obviously a little bit of a shaky strategy, but it's kind of the same logic as building a nuclear weapon to stop someone else from blowing you up with their nuclear weapon, right? So it's a little bit of a shaky strategy. We're going to build up a strong military. You're going to build up a strong military. And there won't be a war because neither people want to have a nuclear war. It's not a very fun war to have. The outcome is pretty obvious. You know, hundreds of millions of people die. You know, when two superpowers have a war. And so that's kind of trying to create peace by building up one's military. In a similar way, a child tries to have long-term cessation of pain by punishing themselves. It's not the most direct and efficient strategy, but it's better than no strategy, or it wouldn't have been adopted. So you have a conscious response, but this graph here of competency, since nobody wants to feel pain, the people that are in the most pain are either the most powerless or the most incompetent. Right? Now, in an individualistic cult such as our own, if you say that someone's incompetent, it's a shaming thing to say because we attribute full responsibility to the individual, which is, of course, absurd, right? Because in a competent cult that teaches its members how to alleviate pain in kindergarten, middle school, high school, and college, there are very low levels of pain. In an incompetent cult, where you show them how to suppress their pain, numb their pain, and add to their pain, well, there are very high levels of pain. And when there's no clear protocols within the cult to learn how to reduce that pain, you have many, many members of the, a high percentage of that cult will be in pain. But since nobody aspires to chronic, long-term, unavoidable pain, then highly competent members of any cult, highly competent cults, highly competent members of that cult have lower and lower pain. Now, similarly, you can have, high knowledge, but low power. But power is a form of competency, right? So if you're powerless within your cult, then that's a low form of competency, right? So I know what to do, I just can't do it. Nobody will listen to me. I don't know how to talk in a way that people will listen to me. Powerlessness is a form of incompetence, right? Because everyone wants to have more power, certainly if they correlate power with well-being, right? And real power, what kind of power is it if it doesn't include the ability to improve your own life? So if you can improve your own life by knowing a technology, knowing a protocol that works, you want to know that technology and you want to improve your life. Now, there's also, along with, numbing, avoiding, dissociation, self-harm, there's also stoicism. Now, this also has to do with the pride of endurance. This is when people willingly endure pain in public to show a couple of things. One, to show their strength. And what they're showing is basically that no matter how much pain I'm in, I maintain my identity. And this is comforting for the ego in individuals and cultures. And the other thing that they can be doing, the other reason that Stoicism is popular in a cult setting, is that cults are statistically highly incompetent. Meaning if you look at, 99% of the 10,000 cultures in human history, and you look at, when did the people die, how many people died in childbirth, how many people died of disease, how many people had a sense of wealth and creativity, many people had a sense of purpose, how many people had honor and respect, had love and belonging. We're often talking less than 5% of the people in a given cult lived lives that anyone would aspire to. Well, that means the cult is 95% incompetent. And the question is, what are you going to do if you're an incompetent cult and people are in pain? Well, if you reward them and tell them what great people they are for complaining, then you will have 95% of your population complaining, I'm in pain, do something. And the only thing that an incompetent cult can respond is to say, well, we don't know what to do, right? And that's, of course, the truth, right? When you have 95% mediocre, unfulfilled, painful, wretched lives, it's not because the cult said, let's try and ruin the lives of 95% of our population. It's because the cult doesn't know what it's doing. It's not competent enough to deliver highly valuable, meaningful lives for everyone there, which is made more difficult by the fact that the idea of a satisfying life is largely relative, right? And so let's say you raise everyone's life up to the level of the first 5%, right? So before, if you were a king, maybe you had some meat 3 or 4 times a week. If you were a king, maybe you had a wool coat. If you were a king, you had a nice horse or some transportation. You had a book to read, right? A rarity, in the 1200, BC or whatever. Well, the people who are slogging away in the fields don't know how to read, don't have a horse, don't have any meat for months. Well, that's a great life worth living, right? Because it's relative, it's being compared, right? So what happens if everyone has 3 meals of meat a week, and everyone has a horse or a car, and everyone has not only 1 coat, but 2 or 3 coats? 95% of the population rise, and they all have not only 1 book, they have a bookshelf, right? Okay, well, suddenly now the standard has changed, right? And so there is, in order to aspire, in order to evolve, there is always going to be a minority of people that are ahead of the majority and that can be aspired to, right? And, the cult, if it's competent, has to be able to say, do this, 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 and this, and then you can do that too, right? So that it empowers its members to achieve that level of excellence. But if it can't, right? If, as in the current state, you say, well, get a college degree, and you say, well, no, wait a minute. I'm surrounded by people with college degrees who are living crappy lives, who are not getting good jobs, who are unemployed. So the promise isn't holding up, right? Well, suffice it to say that the more incompetent your cult is at fulfilling the promise of a better life than the lives of the past, the more they appreciate Stoicism, right? So, your parents, fools as they are in many cases, can't put food on the table, can't listen to your feelings, can't take time to help you with your schoolwork. They don't know what they're doing, right? And so, there's 3 complaining kids, and then there's 1 kid who keeps their mouth shut and grims and bears it. And the parents naturally say, well, why can't all you 3 complaining kids be like this one? Harry's not complaining. He's bearing it like a man, right? And so there's an elevation of Stoicism because it's convenient, right? If you're surrounded by fools in leadership that don't have a clear path to well-being that's working, right? If you do, then by all means offer it. But if you don't, then you're likely to nobilize suffering, to nobilize Stoicism, right? Life is is miserable. It's just that way, and the real people grim and bear it, right? So that's a cultural, adaptation to pain. Now, in transcendence, we have another response to pain. Now, in this area, let's say you're dying of terminal cancer, you've got horrible arthritis, you can barely sleep, etc., and you, right? Again, it's a crisis of competence, right? I mean, obviously, if anyone who cared about you could snap their fingers and all those symptoms would go away, well, then hopefully they would be snapping their fingers. But when we're in territory that is going to be filled with pain that we have kind of given up on, like there's certain diseases we just say, well, we just don't have the skill to cure those diseases in this century. So what are your options? Well, you can focus on how horrible it is until you die, or you could transcend it. And by transcending, I mean you focus on something else, like you take up poetry, you start meditating. Your body's still screaming and come on, do something, but you've recognized that you don't know what to do, and neither do the people around you. And so it's a matter of turning your attention to something else that's beyond, right? To the beauty of life, to the way that other people have transcended and made the best of things. And so there's a sense of dissociation and transcendence. And one of the qualities of transcendence, or one of the ingredients, is to go beyond, to go into, like you can say, for example, how do you transcend arthritis? My hand, they're just so painful, right? How do you transcend arthritis pain, right, in your hand? Well, one way to transcend it is to say, isn't it beautiful to be alive? When you're alive, you feel exquisite pain and exquisite pleasure. Intensely alive, I'm just enjoying being present with life. And that means I'm very aware of my arthritic pain, but I also, the same sharpness of focus that comes from that pain, I notice just how beautiful my nephew's child is, right? And I see that even more clearly. So I transcend the focus on avoiding or complaining about suffering, and I focus instead on the beauty of life, which includes a mix of suffering and pleasure as part of one basket, as part of one cycle, one probability field. And so I'm just reveling at being here and alive. And every exquisite moment of pain and every moment that I can't fully connect with you, right? I value being alive, and the opportunity to have each day. So there can be transcendence. There can also be addiction. So transcendence, to think of something better. It can also be addiction. Now, in the cycle of time, pain often generates the biggest transformative changes. So basically how it works is people generally, when they find a comfortable routine, a comfortable identity, pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, they continue it. They're like, oh, good, I've escaped the misery of my childhood, the traumas of this and that. I found something comfortable, so I'm just going to keep doing it, right? And so they keep doing it, right? And it can get a little boring. It certainly lacks depth and breadth because we're just staying in our lane, so to speak. Well, then something really painful happens. And as a result of the pain and the inability to endure it, we start making changes that we never would have made if we weren't in pain, right? So we begin transforming, changing our form from one form to another. And we decide we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and do this. And then because we made those three choices, there are a variety of new things that happen that are also, would never have happened if we hadn't done those three things. And because of those, there's a whole new variety. And what that means is that like 10 years after the traumatic event, when we look back, we've often found a new stasis, a new state of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, a new status quo. And we like it. And not only do we like it, but we have greater depth because we can compare this status quo with the old status quo. And we can also see that there are benefits that we wouldn't have had if we hadn't had the transformation. And so in this way, the terror and hate and fear, and I never want to feel this way again, turns into a sweet gratitude. where no, it's not that I'm grateful for the pain, but I'm grateful for the life that it has given me. If it wasn't for this and this and this, I never would have done this and this, right? And so the thing that we were most terrified of, or most frightened of, in the larger cycles and arcs of time, lead to new patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, new creativity. And we end up feeling grateful and looking wistfully back, and we're pleased that that event happened, because we know that without that event, we never would have made those changes. And we know without those changes, we never would have had the things we have today. And there's sweetness, there's goodness in what we have today. And so there's an acceptance, right? Now, this, on another kind of thread and kind of area of pain, you might call personal and spiritual development, right? So without pain, there's no compassion. So when we've experienced a painful event and someone else goes through a painful event, we now have created a foundation of compassion, right? And so here's where pain becomes then a spiritual teacher, right? Compassion is viewed as a high art in psychology, in spirituality, in Buddhism, for example. And the pain is the seed that creates the understanding, that lays the foundation for empathy, that lays the foundation for compassion for another person feeling pain. And suddenly pain, a negative energy, becomes the basis for compassion, a positive energy for both people involved, right? So pain becomes the basis of compassion. In the cycle of change, pain can become the basis of gratitude. I'm grateful to life, to the universe, for giving me the disruption, the pain that led me to cause these things, because I wasn't going to do it otherwise. And I'm glad I did. So we have compassion. Pain can also be a basis of faith, right? I have faith that the universe, that God, that life has a plan. And so I'm going to deepen into that relationship and into that surrender, so that pain can be a basis of certain surrender into faith. Now, pain can also lead to regression and PTSD, where I refuse to budge until this changes, and it never changes, and we die hanging on to the most painful moments of our lives without changing. So pain can be a stimuli to profound regression and PTSD, where we relive the most horrific moments we don't let go, we don't trust, and we stay stuck in the past and cannot move forward. Pain can be kind of the stimuli to paralysis, which would be another one. So regression, paralysis. PTSD. If pain is undigestible and at a high amplitude, a shocking undigestible amount of pain, can lead to PTSD, where first of all the identity begins to dissolve and shatter. Our identity of thinking, our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being begins to shatter. The ego, the I that holds on to our pattern in fear of death and fear of the unknown, clings desperately to the pattern, and the thing that it can hang on to most intensely, most reliably, is the traumatic event itself. So it just relives the traumatic event itself so as not to disperse into the unknown, so as not to die and experience radical transformation. And so that we have a cycle of PTSD. Pain equals separation from and longing for something we value, something we want, something that makes us feel good. there's a tremendous creativity that surrounds it, right? Because one thing that also happens around pain for a loved one is, for example, we develop new cures for diseases. We develop new technologies, right? We develop a new system for treating arthritis, a new medicine, right? So pain gives birth to science in a variety of ways. Right? We value the cessation of pain, and so we spend vast sums of time, money, and natural resources coming up with new ways to respond to the pain, to numb it, to treat it, to avoid it, to get rid of the cause of that pain, right? When we understand that polluted drinking water leads to massive amounts of pain, we clean up the drinking water. And we develop microscopic technologies to do so, and we develop various knowledges in these areas. So pain is the stimuli of all evolution, of all science. Right? I want a faster car to avoid the drudgery, the pain of being late. Right? I was rushing. The doctor was rushing to save an infant's life, but their car could only go 25 miles an hour. If only their car had been able to drive 40 miles an hour, it would have got there in time, and a life would have been saved. And this fuels the pain of a family. Let's donate money to cure cancer. Let's donate money to do this and raise awareness out of pain. I felt what that's like. I don't want anyone else to experience that, so I'm going to evolve the cult. I'm going to participate in the evolution of science and technology, right? So pain is the birthplace in many ways of compassion, creativity, technology, empathy. It's the birthplace of fear as well, right? Pain gives rise to fear. All fear is the fear of pain, right? And so we can also give birth to fear. We feel some horrible pain. We never want to feel that way again. And so we start saying, I've got to avoid these people, these substances, this situation, because I don't want to feel that pain again. And so pain is also produces the teacher of fear. Fear is the guide that says, if you go this way, there's pain based on the best available data. And so some of the many ways of understanding and exploring pain.